So sometime in Washington, when I'm there in the evening, with some of my colleagues, we walk down, we go to the statue, go to the Lincoln Memorial. We say, let's check on Mr. Lincoln. And then we go to the statue, to the memorial for President Jefferson. So let's check on Mr. Jefferson. Let's check on Mr. Roosevelt or Mr. Washington. But in a few months, we will have to be saying that let's go and check on Dr. King. It's going to be just unbelievable. And he would be the first, I believe, the first private citizen to have a major memorial to him on the memorial.
What advice can you offer to young students like me who is very much interested in civil rights?
One of the things that I would suggest to you is to learn as much as you can about the civil rights movement. Read the books, the literature, and I would be happy when I get back to Washington. Even here, there's 2 or 3 wonderful children books on the movement. I know you know all about Eyes on the Prize, the film footage. But we have film footage that we can get you also to tell the story of the civil rights movement. And another thing, if you haven't visited the Martin Luther King Center, I would suggest that you go there. And maybe some weekend, maybe even during school week, maybe as a group, that you can, with your parents or with your teachers. It's not that far. And we've been talking about doing something like this. It's taking students on a trip. And maybe we can help arrange that we do a bus trip. And I'll be your tour guide. I would love to do that with you. That we can go maybe one weekend or one day. We can go to Montgomery. Every year I take a group of members of Congress, from not just members of Congress, but people from all over the world. Ambassador from South Africa, the ambassador from Germany, and from several other countries are going with us. And members of Congress. President Obama, when he was a senator, went with us. President Clinton went one year. As president and as former president, Senator Clinton, when she was in the Senate, went with us. We can go to Montgomery. I grew up over 50 miles from Montgomery. We can go to the site where Rosa Parks was arrested. And we can go, there's a Rosa Parks Museum there. We can go to Dr. King's old church and stand in that pulpit. It's a little red brick church. It's a short distance from the state capitol. If you're a baseball player, you can almost stand on the step of that church and take a baseball and almost hit the steps of the capitol of the state of Alabama. It's amazing to me. And go to Reverend Abernathy's church, where we were forced to stay in the church all night during the Freedom Ride. And visit the home of Dr. King that was bombed in 1955. We can go to Birmingham and visit the park where Bull Connor used the dogs and the farm horses. Go to the Civil Rights Museum there maybe one day. And go to the church where the 4 little girls were killed on a Sunday morning on September 15, 1963. Or go to Selma and walk across the bridge. And you can see it and you can feel it. One day when I took a group of students and their parents to Selma, to Birmingham, we were walking through the park and they had a replica of the dog. This little girl, she was 9 years old. And I had her by the hand. We were walking through the park, and she came up near this dog, and the dog was so red, she jumped. Now this same little girl is a senior at Brown University in Rhode Island, and she's the head of something called the John F. Kennedy Jr. Political Club. And they invited me to speak there on Monday morning. So I'm going to fly to Providence, Rhode Island to speak, and she graduated this month, maybe the 1st of June. I'm going on too long, so go ahead, I'm sorry.
What was the turning point in the civil rights movement?
I think the major turning point in the civil rights movement maybe took place in Birmingham in 1963, when the American people saw Bull Connor loosing dogs and fire hoses on women and children, and they couldn't take it. And then President Kennedy spoke to the nation, and then out of that came the March on Washington, and when Dr. King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and transformed those steps into a modern-day pulpit, when he stood up and said, "I have a dream today, a dream deeply rooted in the American dream." Dr. King was preaching a sermon to the American people, and that helped educate and sensitize so many people.
What inspired you to want to be a preacher?
Well, I grew up in a very religious family, and I learned to read the Bible when I was very young, and I wanted to preach the gospel, and I started preaching by preaching to those chickens, and I said today when I would preach to some of those chickens, the chickens and my brothers and sisters, first cousin would become the audience of the congregation. And I would be preaching, and I said, when I look back on it, some of those chickens that I preached to during the 40s and the 50s would bow their head. Some of those chickens would shake their head. They never quite said amen. But I'm convinced that some of those chickens tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me today in the congregation. And some of those chickens were just a little more productive. At least they would just say.
Were you ever scared when you marched during the civil rights movement?
No, I was never afraid during the marches or the sit-ins or during the freedom rides. You come to that point where you lose that sense of fear. We studied the philosophy of nonviolence. We studied what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa, what he did in India. We studied what Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Reverend Abernathy and many, many others were all about. And you come to that point where you say, they're not afraid. And we were saying, they're not afraid. And we would never walk alone. We used to sing a song, I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around.